So look, a lot of you know Rimo already, which is great. I'm going to give you the very quick salesy bit, and then I'm going to hand across to the person who's actually going to be speaking today, Sumit Halbadia, who's our CTO and co-founder, and actually the person that wrote the code, so he can answer the very difficult questions. And I can't, frankly, but I'll set the scene a little bit and then hand across to Simon. For those of you who know Rimo, we've changed somewhat over the last 6 months or so. There's been a reasonable amount of change, and we're going to get into that in a bit more detail. But set the scene. This is how we see the workspace today. So typically, and this is very typically, very manual process, right? So application migration, application management is usually a human-centric process, i.e. lots of bodies, usually quite slow, and the adage "you're only as good as your worst packager" is typically standard fare. So that means things can be slow. Migrations from A to B can be slow, etc., etc. What Rimo have done is built at a very high level. This is actually Jim and Tom for your benefit. This was Scott Manchester. So Scott, we pitched to Scott 6 months ago in the US. And Scott was like, what you guys have done is built a digital twin, right, that allows customers to detonate, or in advance of any disaster happening, create a detonation zone. Right? So you can basically test environments, test updates. And for Rimo 3, an update is anything. That could be a modern app format change, it could be a move to a new OS, it could be a CVE update, it could be a patch, whatever it might be. We allow you to test that change against a very safe environment, or a detonation zone, as Scott's the term. So what that means is we're going to preempt any issue before it happens. So when apps and updates are deployed to a new world, and a new world for Rimo is modern operating systems, so Windows 11, typically Intune, AVD, Windows 365, whatever modern workspace environment you're heading towards, whatever landing zone you're heading towards, you can go there with assurance that it's not going to blow up in effect. All this is done via an automation process, but I'm going to hand across to you because we've got 10 minutes left.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So I don't know why it's building by itself, Dave. Did you do this?
Isn't that automation?
And it's finest. Yeah. Inadvertent automation. So, we built Rimo 3 on 3 principles, right? This has been the evolution where we've always been known for. Oh, can you not? Can you hear me now?
No, it's for the recording.
Oh, for the recording. Awesome. Which is hard for me to not move around. But so we built it on 3 pillars, and the pillars are really focused on automation, extensibility, as well as visibility. So for us, when we start thinking about migrations, or we start thinking about moving from point A to point B, whether it's a large migration, like I want to move off of my on-prem legacy VDI into a cloud-based VDI, or even a persistent cloud PC environment, and change OSs at the same time, the thing that you really need to figure out is not whether Windows will work. Windows is obviously going to work, but Windows is only as good as the applications delivered via Windows. So our automation theory was really based on the fact that why are we spending time doing manual processes when we can actually take all of the context that you've built, everything that you've put into SCCM, the conditional logic of the packages, the dependency mapping of the packages, the detection services. You might as well just suck all that information out and then actually execute that in a known good environment, which might be your Citrix Server 2019 Zen app environment. It could be a physical Windows 10 build, doesn't matter. What we're able to do at that point through our automation is onboard that application. And during that onboarding process, we go through an installation in that known good environment, so we understand the construct, the files, the changes that have been made to that operating system, and we now have the DNA of that application. Now, once we have the DNA of that application, we actually go in and execute the application, and that's where our second patent lies. So we're able to go through, without traditional RPA, no scripting, we actually execute each entry point of that application, launch the parent process, look for clicks, to launch children processes that are most likely to spawn children processes. So a button click, don't hit that X in the top right corner. Hit OK, and then all of a sudden you'll see it continue kind of running. So this runs for a course of 1 to 3 minutes, but the goal of this is not necessarily to give you a functional test of your application. It's about giving you that data to decide, guess what? These applications are ready for Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 365, Windows AVD. Is it a good candidate for MSIX? Because once you actually understand the construct and we've onboarded that package, the world's your oyster. You can test it against 12 different builds. Some physical Windows 11, some Windows 365. It doesn't matter because, again, we are taking your application with all the contextual relevance and test it against your desired landing zones or builds. So every time you make a change, whether it's to the operating environment through a cumulative update, or you make a change in your Intune settings and your security posture, or it's a new version of the application, it's as simple as pointing it to the automation, and it's going to run inside of your Azure tenant. It's about 12 cents per application to run the entire life cycle of that application and automation, and you're able to get an understanding of which apps are good candidates to be delivered to that environment. Now, in the event that there's a failure, we actually capture that failure on video with screenshots and the error log, so you can send that back to the packaging team or the application owners or the vendors and say, guys, can you please fix this because I need to move these to Windows 11, I need to move them to Windows 365. So the automations that we've built are all API first, and it's really focused on allowing you to improve your existing change management workflows through ServiceNow or whatever orchestration mechanism you might be using. But ultimately, at the end of about 12 minutes, you can have a report like this for your entire application portfolio telling you, is this something that will work on my Windows Wealth Management build versus my Windows Retail build versus my Windows GA build? Is this something that will work with my sys hardened level 1 machine? Is this something that will work in Windows 365? Is this something that can be used in my AVD multi-session, multi-pooled type of environment? So all of a sudden what you're getting at the end of this automation is an understanding and a roadmap around what's the best way to deliver that application to the end user on their desired platform. And that's all done unattended. The only part that requires human intervention is when you see a failure. That's where you're going to have to take that recording. That's where you take the error. But it's no longer finding a needle in a haystack. It's more like, here's the error. Go in and fix it, please, and I can run it back through the automation. So you can see that this is something that's repeatable across any change that you actually deploy in your environment, and it's a great way to keep your applications evergreen, and more importantly, keep your operating environment patched and secure, not 14 days later, but rather that same week, right? So the automation is a big chunk of our value proposition, but it doesn't just limit itself to testing, right? It's really focused on much more. So if you want to package to a modern format, like app volumes, like MSIX, like taking advantage of app attach, we run through the same automation so that we can actually see if it's a good candidate for MSIX. We can see if it's a good candidate for Flex App or for app volumes. And then if it is, we go ahead and convert it for you. So now you actually have a modern package ready for your modern environment that you're going to be deploying it to, and it's already been validated. So it's a great way for you to take a lot of those manual steps and different processes and workflows that you're currently doing over the course of 14 days, 28 days, sometimes I hear 45 days from a change request or an application request to delivery. And this really gives us the opportunity to compress that time and ensure that you have a quality package, quality and consistency and time to value. Now, that's where we used to play. We've actually extended beyond that. So we've been lucky enough, Dave mentioned, we partner closely with the Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop team, and Scott and Jim and Tom and a lot of these other folks, but we've recently started working with Jason Rojak and the Intune team. And one of the things that they've been very open about is there are gaps in Intune, believe it or not. So when you start thinking about it, Intune was built for purpose for MDM and MAM, and application delivery for people that are used to using Config Manager, having that granular level of control, sending it to the right DP, setting the right conditional access. That stuff is a bit different inside of Intune. And what we thought we could do is help bridge that gap and continue that theme of automation. So as and when your applications are ready for deployment, and we've exported them into Intune from SDCM, we've done that migration, we've Intune WinWrapped them, we've MSIX them, whatever they might be, those packages are sitting in Intune ready for deployment. But that's just half the battle, right? What we thought would be an extremely valuable thing based on some MVP feedback and some customer feedback is, can you marry your application readiness data with the Intune rich data so that I can start making really quick decisions on if it's safe to deploy this application to this user? And that's really where we started that kind of thesis, which is let's bridge that gap around app delivery and app management inside of Intune. So having the ability to come in inside of Intune and say, okay, for this particular Docker desktop application, it's ready for deployment, but before I set my bulk actions and app assignments and group assignments, let's take a look and see if it worked on Windows 11. Let's see if it worked on those particular builds that those users are going to consume it on. And right here, in one snapshot, you have the ability to say, not only is that application safe to deploy, but is my user ready to consume it? And at this point, if you feel comfortable, you'll see that if you scroll up, actually, since we didn't only have 15 minutes, I couldn't do a live demo, but if you scroll up, you'll see that you can start doing things like bulk assignments. You can come in and do bulk actions to say, I want to assign it to these Entra groups. I want to take advantage of all of the phase deployment capabilities that Intune natively provides. I want to take advantage of a quick deploy, it doesn't matter. And you have the ability to take that and actually simplify it into 2 clicks as opposed to assigning an application to 15 different groups or whatever the case might be. So all of a sudden, not only do you have the data on whether or not it's safe to deploy the application, but you have a simple way to just trigger an automation to say, go, do the phase deployment, this is the template I want to use, we're off to the races, and all of a sudden now you have an application not only migrated from Config Manager, but also deployed to that end user endpoint. And again, it doesn't matter what that endpoint looks like. And the third tenet that we've just introduced is visibility, right? So we have automation, we have extensibility, and visibility. And visibility is really focused on giving you insight post-deployment. We're not DEX, we don't want to be DEX, but how many people here are thrilled with Intune reporting? That's the exact same that I see. Oh, Tom, that's good, Tom, that's good. So what we've done is we've actually layered on top of this, and this is something that is just a Band-Aid, right? At some point, Security Copilot, Intune Copilot's going to give you NLP-based reporting metrics, but for the next couple of years, you now have the ability to come in here and start building your own reports off of Graph API, right? The Graph API has certain limitations. Whether they're urban legends or not is yet to be determined. But now we have the ability to get near real-time reporting, right? We're pulling the data twice a day. You can obviously configure that. But things like finding out what CVEs are in here, which applications that are deployed today are now no longer safe to be deployed, like Docker Desktop 333. You now see that there's 5 vulnerabilities, the base score is awful. You can actually take action at this point. So not only are you getting that visibility, but now you go back to the automation, it'll go back to Patch Catalog, which is free, and you have the ability to find the next version of Docker, subscribe to it, and run it through that automation pipeline, including packaging, including validation, and then it's sitting in Intune within the next hour, ready for deployment. And at that point, you go through and you trigger that deployment. You can swap out 333, which has a lot of vulnerabilities, assuming all the dependencies and the workspace is not going to be corrupted in any way. You then have the ability to go ahead and trigger additional workflows based on the data that you see here so that the automation continues around the lifecycle, whether it's a new version of the application, a more secure version of the application, or ultimately just a new operating environment that you want to deploy to. Because that doesn't matter. I go on vibes, Dave. It doesn't matter what the time is. Time is a relative concept. So that's the visibility portion. And really, when we start thinking about the overall, we talk about that overall story, it is about being able to get you to a new workspace. It's about being able to allow you to manage that new workspace, leveraging more automation than you ever have before. and ultimately, once you get into Intune, being able to report on Intune and take action on the data that comes out. Now, this is very much focused on application and workspace management, but you're going to see that we're continuing to work with Microsoft and their engineering team around some really interesting new initiatives that will expand beyond just the workspace. So in the sake of staying on time, which I just nailed, by the way, feel free to, I don't know which one is which, by the way.
The left-hand side is our visibility tool. The right-hand side is our issue.
So it's a Chrome, yeah. So play with them, let us know what works. There's feedback built right into the reporting mechanism. There's feedback built right into the Chrome plugin or Edge plugin. But ultimately, you have the ability to play for 30 free days, go to town, tell us what's good, tell us what's bad, and then we'll take that feedback on board. But appreciate the time, everyone, and I think I'm keeping you from coffee, so enjoy the day.